Good afternoon and welcome to this CNBC Africa special broadcast where we're coming to you from the Ekurhuleni Civic Centre in Germiston. The city of Ekurhuleni's 2013-14 budget has just been tabled. It's kept in mind the municipality's theme of this year, which is strengthening social maturity by advancing social cohesiveness in pursuit of a prosperous city. Unfortunately, unable to join us this afternoon as a result of unforeseen circumstances, the Executive Mayor of the city of Ekurhuleni, Mondli Gungubele. But with us this afternoon is the MMC for Finance, Moses Makwakwa, and joining us as well, Bennet Nikani, who's the MMC for Economic Development. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us today. Let's perhaps start off with a broad economic overview, Councillor. The Ekurhuleni Municipality is certainly not immune to the socio-economic challenges that are currently at play in the country. To what extent has the current economic climate come to bear on the budget? To what extent has it put a strain on economic development?
Definitely a strain is actually felt by the city, noting that we are actually operating not in an isolated point as within the global economics. And you will also note the fact that the city is actually the industrial workshop of the continent, and the products that are being produced by the same industries are actually getting transported throughout the world, so would actually be heavily affected. However, the city has actually taken very good steps in relation to how best we can revitalize our manufacturing hub. It's one of the flagships that has actually found an expression in the presentation of the budget by the MMC for Finance, Moses Makwakwa, as part of 9 other flagships that the city has actually put in place.
Well, we'll be drilling down into the detail of that in just a bit. Councillor Makwakwa, let's look at revenue collection, though, because one assumes that this becomes a more arduous task. It becomes a tougher feat in this kind of environment. How are things looking on that front? Because you've initiated a whole lot of that makes collection processes an effective one in the municipality.
Yes, well, our standing as a municipality, we do collect up to 93% now, which we are not satisfied. We still have to up our collection rates in terms of revenue. But that it's influenced by socio-economic environment. We have a large population that is poor, and all those people depend on those who have to subsidize them. And that's the biggest problem, and it makes us to be in a difficult position in terms of the revenue. But we are striving. Look, our focus point will be around the government building, government accounts. It's about business account, which they carry close to about 62% of our revenue. Then you'll have your residential accounts. But if you look at your residential account, there's those who have and those who don't have within that residential account, and it doesn't come fully as it is, and it's quite a big problem.
If you look at your capital base, let's look at how exactly that is made up. I mean, how much of that comes through from services delivered from the provincial government, and then your own capital raising initiatives like the one you've embarked on within the fixed income space, raising capital via bond issuances?
Look, we get grants from national government. We amount to about 1.5 billion of the grants. Presently, about 18 we generate from our own 18 billion generate from our own revenue streams, which is expected from tax of the residents to pay. We normally go on the market for 800 million rand on the market every year to support our capital investment projects. Obviously, they get oversubscribed because people, the way we manage our finances, people think that we are managing good.
So with that kind of confidence out there, are you looking at expanding your capital funding sources?
We have to expand our capital, because if you look at the rate of our operational expenditure and capital expenditure, there's quite a huge gap. whilst we still need to maintain and all those things, but there's a lot of programs for redevelopment in terms of our city as Ekurhuleni. Now we need to expand that, but we just cannot expand it without putting other necessary resources like your personnel, and you're looking at what are these things that we need to do as far as your expansion. But we have a focus-based approach in terms of infrastructure, redressing of the infrastructure backlog. We think around North Tembisa, we have moved miles, and we're about to conclude. We are starting the east now, investing a lot in the east. Immediately we'll come to the south to conclude that. Then we'll have put up new infrastructure. We have put up new social facilities to communities. But we have a challenge of maintaining the old infrastructure, because as we move on, that infrastructure decays, and we need to find a way of how do we maintain, and rebuild that infrastructure.
Well, looking at the total budgeted operating revenue for the 2013-14 financial period, it stands at 26.5 billion rand. That represents an 11% growth on the prior year. It doesn't look too bad on a headline basis. Councillor Nikani, how are you rating your status when it comes to being a financially viable municipality, and this alluding to how revenue actually caters to the kind of expenditure demands that are out there to foster economic development?
Now we are quite good. Even the rating, as said by the public and private opinions, we are actually quite in a good standing as the municipality. We also consider this factor that we are raising of increasing, but also having the challenges in terms of maintaining and sustaining the city. That is why the city is actually also saying, whilst there is so much good that we have to do in as far as your public infrastructure, but you must also take into cognizance the numbers of the people that are unemployed. Hence, this particular year, we have actually introduced or expand on the Lungile Mtshali program, which the view is to reduce the numbers that are appearing in our indigent register and create opportunities for such people to be able to work and do some of the services that are naturally provided by the municipality, and thus creating jobs. In doing so, you are actually putting money into the pockets of those individuals so that they can then come back and reinvest by paying for the services that are rendered by the municipality.
So let's then look at the goals here, because it's to spend the budget in a focused and impact-based manner as opposed to a piecemeal approach. That's what you said this afternoon in your address. So drilling into CapEx now, that's up 16.6% on last year. It's being guided by a capital investment framework. Break that down for us and what exactly we're looking at there.
Look, when we look at the municipality focal point and say this is a municipality, their inhabitants are sitting here, there's need for a lot of amenities. The first point that we identify is that, look, for us to integrate this city, because we had 11 administration in 2000 that we had to integrate. We have not built one single city. Now, for the objective to build a single city, we need to have a clear focal point of saying, how do we rebuild the city and make sure that there's integration. The first point is that, how do we make sure that people identify that they belong to this city?
So what are your 3 priority areas in that regard?
Look, in terms of the rebuilding, it's about how do we make sure that we put up catalytic project that could bring about that unification. One of the BRT project, what you call it, the transport infrastructure development project. It's one of the projects that we think it could assist us, one, to deal with the integration of communities, 2, it could create more jobs, 3, it could make life to be easier. Because a person who's supposed to be who stays in Tutuza in Ekurhuleni, if he wants to go to a port, he has to take about 3-4 transport. Now, with the integrated transport system, it's going to be easy for people to move around. Once there's there's mobility, then a lot of economic generation initiatives will come then. The second point that we want to say that we have a decay infrastructure where old towns are still there. And they need to be improved, they need to be integrated. Now, we must find a way of how do we change things. Our growth and development strategy talks about what are the key areas that we need to look at. One of the key areas is around addressing the infrastructure backlog. The second point that they are talking about is about the redesign of a city in terms of its landscape and how we want to do. And those are some of the key projects that we are looking at in terms of that aspect.
We're talking about the projects. Let's look at project feasibility in whichever quarter in terms of realistic timelines and budget phases needs to be emphasized here, because we've had unacceptable delays, for example, in the implementation of some of your 2012-2013 projects, contributing to that 16.6% rise in capex over the last year. So what kind of checks and balances need to be in place to monitor that entire process a little bit more effectively?
In our institutional review process, we saw a need that we need to establish a unit which is actually called Enterprise Project Management Office, which must actually be supported by departmental project management units in every space, because we identify the key aspect that which makes us not to be able to spend our monies. We did not actually have this capability. So those are the key aspects that we thought we should put in place. Their primary role is to actually give us the early warnings through the monitoring and evaluation of the progress. And in that process, political heads of department, MMCs in their respective portfolios, they need to actually on monthly basis get the expenditure patterns as to what is actually happening in their departments. As they do so, they feed into a mayoral committee, special mayoral committee, which is actually sitting on monthly basis, giving us feedback. But over and above that, the city always goes out into the public. You also then get the feedback from the public through the imbizos. So we are not only saying seated in the office as the team that is actually working there. You should also go out and get the view of those that are actually recipients of the services that we are providing.
So we see the fostering of a participative environment here. Councillor Makwakwa, on the flip side, concerns have been raised around the low spending pattern when it comes to implementation of a capital budget. Poor planning and capacity constraints are no longer considered these compelling reasons, for underspending. So how close an eye is being kept on that, and what are the consequences for non-spending?
One of the biggest consequences for non-spending, we are not going to pay a bonus to a department head whose capital budget is not spent, because that will be doing injustice to our community. That's why I'm saying we're providing capacity, we're providing all necessary resources. People must not complain, they must spend. And politically, there must be an ownership from the political principal on the spending in the department. It must not have a way where people don't understand what's happening. And the political consequences is something else anyway. But for administration, if you have to be demoted, yesterday the mayoral committee received a policy on performance agreement. If a person has to be demoted because he's not spending, he will have to do.
Well, those very drastic steps that will be taken. We're going to have to take a quick break right now. Councillors will be back with both the councillors straight after this, so don't go away.